Welcome, everybody, to the GAMEOLOGY podcast, episode 35, in our continuation of a look at the Mario series. This episode will be called The Good, the Bad, and the Super Mario 3D World. I am one of your hosts, Matthew Falvey, and I'm joined by...
Attila Gabriel-Briansky.
All right, Attila. We've laughed at this name, Super Mario 3D World. It's a very Japanese way of naming something to just continue adding more adjectives. It's got an interesting lineage. Super Mario 3D Land had come out for the 3DS. I'm not sure they really knew where to go after Mario Galaxy had explored the 3D space so well. But I will say I really, really enjoy the direction that they went in this one, and I had a lot more fun with this game than I did with Galaxy.
That's interesting. I guess it really comes down to the fundamental difference between the two games is like Mario Galaxy, you enter a sort of sandbox and you play in that sandbox, and then you play in the 3D Land and 3D World, you're playing sort of one-off levels. So it's a bit more structured, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely... It's more of a linear game in a way, whereas like the 3D Marios, they tend to have like an open area, more, like you said, more sandbox, more puzzle. It wasn't really about worrying about enemies killing you, and the tougher levels were about some pits and some platforms. But I feel like 3D World is more focused and more linear. Enemies are a bit more of a problem because you are focused more to that. I feel like it's more of a hybrid between 3D and 2D.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting space in terms of, like, I'd say there's now sort of three lines of Mario games going. There's the sort of 2D Marios that are going under the new Super Mario Brothers line of games. There's the sort of in-between, which is the 3D Land, 3D World games, one for 3DS, one for Wii U. And then there's the sort of actual like open world-ish 3D Mario games, which like Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy, and then of course the upcoming title for the Nintendo Switch.
Right. Now, one of the things that makes this more of a hybrid is that there's a fixed camera. That's something I really like, because you're not fighting to control the camera at any point. That's never a problem unless the developers made a serious oversight. Another part I really like about it is that they've switched from a pure 360 degree, or however many degrees you actually have of movement, and now it's locked into an 8-way directional. And the thing I really like about that is that you can have a very, very narrow platform, but because that platform is locked on the correct angle Mario can run on, I think you just, it feels like you have more control. They've taken away control, but it feels like you have
more precision.
I feel like I can navigate more treacherous spaces.
Yeah, so you don't have the issue of, like, gosh, this was a really big issue when I was playing through Ocarina of Time with my sister. We were creating save states whenever we needed to walk across something narrow, just because of how difficult that was. And that should never be the hardest part of your game, is walking in a straight line.
Exactly, and I think that's something that they've always struggled with in the 3D space. You know, even generations on, it still can be a bit of a problem. And it's what you saw in Mario Galaxy, where they just slowed everything down, and I felt like that sapped away some of the fun for me. Where in a Mario game, I have the most fun when I can run at full speed, and I feel like 3D World rewards that.
So did you play as Toad?
Oh yeah, almost always Toad. When I first played it, I think I was Princess, and then I realized that the game isn't really that challenging into the later levels, and I'll whip her out when I need a little bit more insurance. But I think the game does a pretty good job of... I mean, if you die a few times, they'll give you a cat suit, or they'll give you a different power-up, and they're pretty generous with the power-up. So I didn't really find the game all that challenging, did you?
I mean, like, I couldn't beat this game because I found it too challenging. Did you unlock the Crown World?
Oh, see, I just went through the main line of the game. I didn't unlock any of the secret parts, which I've heard are a lot more difficult.
Oh yeah. So hang on, did you even unlock Rosalina?
Oh, you know what? I think with this one I got right to the end and then didn't. So here I am talking about how easy the game is, and I haven't even beat it.
Yeah, it's I found it like a nice level of challenge. Like, it wasn't at any point like frustratingly difficult. Just this is the sort of number one thing that whenever I see kids starting out with designing levels for their games, is they will make them like super, super hard, just like filled with enemies and obstacles and things that'll kill them. And it's like, oh, it's still technically possible. It's like, yeah, but no one's gonna find this fun or entertaining. They're not even gonna play it because it's too difficult. And I think they got the sort of density of enemies and obstacles at a really good level in this game, at least for the level of challenge that I wanted out of an experience like this.
Yeah, I think that this is a game that, if you look at the colors, if you look at the artistic style, the music, it's supposed to be a bit of a walk in the park in a way, and then it can turn into a gradual incline and then a hike. But I think what they do really well is that they lock away the more difficult challenge, and at least the first few worlds are a nice introduction into that style and are genuinely pretty fun. I mean, oh man, one of my favorite things is that when you first get to that race and you're on, not a race, but you're riding that water dinosaur and not having to use gyro controls.
Yeah.
I loved, and not having to waggle the Wiimote to do anything precise, I loved. But speaking of controllers, a really fantastic thing about this game is that 4 people can play simultaneously.
Yep.
Which is doesn't necessarily make it easier. In fact, I think it makes it a lot more difficult to, especially with some of the timed platforms, where if you jump, it changes the landscape of the platforms. But what I liked about it was that if you had Wiimotes, if you had classic controllers, whatever you had,
anyone can jump in and play.
Yeah, you can drop in and you can drop out, and they make that very, very easy.
So did you get much of an opportunity to play with other people?
I had played with one other person. He's a hardcore Nintendo fan up to, say, the GameCube era, and then he sort of dropped out for a while. So this was the perfect game for him to jump in and understand what was going on. And they have a nice little bubble feature where if somebody in your team is holding you back, they can just click a button and float to safety while the more skilled figures out the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's something that they sort of borrowed from this game borrows a lot from the New Super Mario Brothers and the 3D Mario games, just in terms of those mechanics. Like that bubble mechanic was in the New Super Mario Brothers games.
Mm-hmm. Did you get a chance to play with anybody?
I think there was one point where I jumped in on a game with a number of people, but I did play the majority of the game just on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think that it's necessary to have somebody to play, but I like that the option was there, and that they made it so simple. The speed burst was something that's quite a lot different from the other games. Rather than it being a gradual ramp up, it's locked into this sort of 2-tier, a puff of speed. And what I liked about it is that when you hit that first and second tier, you can maintain that speed until you bump into something. So I think it becomes a fun little mini game in a way of trying to maintain that momentum as long as possible.
Yeah, like a sort of making the actual traversal of the space its own little puzzle. Whereas bumping into something doesn't injure you, but it does kill your speed.
Right. Just like if you were hopping into an ice skate. Actually, that's something I missed from Mario Galaxy. I think Galaxy did the ice traversal better than any Mario ever, because you can use, even though you have to waggle the Wiimote, which I hate, it turns Mario basically into a guy with skates, and it's a lot more fun because you're moving faster, but they add the challenge of a slower turn radius and the punishment of killing all momentum if you hit something.
Yeah, I definitely think it was an interesting decision to add this, the speed burst mechanic. It's I don't know, a sort of way to make the game a bit more like a sort of speedrun challenge, how quickly can you get through a level by using these speed bursts, because I tried to make Zarnock Fortress a bit more speedrun friendly in terms of having generous dashing mechanics and lots of different traversal abilities, and I wasn't exactly sure what would really make the game enticing to speedrunners, because I think when you see a lot of the popular speedruns on the internet, they're mostly about exploiting glitches and things that let you go faster than the game intends you to be able to go. So when you have these mechanics that are built in to let you go faster, I'm not sure how much people care about that sort of thing, I guess. I never really know if there's a sort of casual speedrunner market that they're tapping into by adding these kind of mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the way a professional speedrunner is going to be very obsessed with the actual statistics of it. I don't think that they're per se a casual speedrunner who is going to brag to their friend about the time that they beat in, but I think still subconsciously you feel that. You feel it sort of inherently, like, I want to go faster, I want to get through this level as fast as I can. Because the first time I played the game, I was a bit more into exploration. The second time I ran through, I was exclusively Toad because I just wanted to blast through the first 4 or 5 worlds or so. But then the game sort of, because of the nature of the hidden stars, where you can go through a level, but if you didn't get any stars from it, you have to basically go back into it. And you gotta seek those down. So that's where the hybrid of how, say, a Mario 64 or Galaxy would approach the more hidden stars. But they're putting in, like, there were some levels, like especially some of the ghost levels, where I had to go back a few times before I eventually found even one of them. So I think that's a fun mechanic to hide them in different areas, and I think they do a pretty good job of intuiting where those extra stars would be.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where I remember in Mario Galaxy 2 they added green stars into all the levels, and it's like, oh, go back and try to find these like secret bonus objectives. And I wasn't really sure what to think of that, because I don't necessarily like the idea of playing through a level and then, like, especially when the levels are sort of meant to be very one-off, like they're not necessarily designed to go back and play through all over again, but just to like keep an eye out for this bonus objective. I like the possibility of finding everything on your first time through, of like perfecting a level and not necessarily having to go back into it. Like, you might want to go back into something because it's fun and you want to play it again, but it almost feels like, I don't know, when you give an extra objective, it feels like homework, and then you don't want to do it, just in a weird way.
Yeah, that definitely, unless I would get to the end of the game, which I haven't done, we've exposed, and wanted to go unlock those other areas, that would be the only motivation I'd have to go get more stars, or I think there was one spot I'd gotten to around World 5 or 6 where I needed to go back and track down a few stars. But I find if you go to those Toad Tracker levels, you can really rack up the stars, because you get about like 5 or 6 stars there. Speaking of a casual speed run, I like the idea of going into a level and having other Miis from the Miiverse, other Wii U gamers, having their ghosts that you can race against. And I found that was it sort of added a nice. There's two things I liked about it. One, they can show you maybe where some secret stars were that you didn't know. And two, it's an added motivation and an added bit of interest to go through the level and try to stay ahead of those people. Even though they're not actually in the room with you, I still felt a drive to be better than them.
Yeah, it makes it more of a direct competition than a sort of like speedrunning for speedrunning's sake.
Mm-hmm. The Mario Kart level, where they have a lot of the same look of a Mario Kart level. They have a sort of a remixed Mario Kart song, and it's all based around speed bursts and ramps up and down and jumps. And what I liked about that was that gimmick and a lot of the other gimmicks in this game, as opposed to, say, Galaxy or some of the other Mario ones, Mario, he still controls, or Toad, you still control using the base physics of the game. And even though this level is a total homage to Mario Kart, you're still running and jumping, and you're not doing anything different than what you have been doing the entire game and will continue to do throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, they're not giving you like a new control scheme or new abilities that are only unique to that level.
Yeah. How did you like the abilities? Because I found that they were, as far as I know, you couldn't fly in the game. It was a lot more about floating. The cat suit I felt was very, very overpowered, because any jump you miss, unless you miss completely, there's almost always something to climb onto, and then you're able to wall jump your way back.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like all the Mario power-ups, in essence, like the Fire Flower gives you the ability to attack and defeat enemies that you would otherwise have to jump on. Like, it's easier to kill enemies with the Fire Flower than it is with having to jump on them. It's easier to make jumps with the Tanuki suit. Like, the point of every Mario power-up is always to make things like that much easier. The cat suit just does a lot of different things, like in terms of being able to like climb straight up ledges, or in terms of being able to like that sort of dive jump you could do, and then you could like cover a lot more distance that way. So It was interesting. I don't know if it was something that they really went in heavy on in this game, and then we're not really going to see it come back in another title. It'll be interesting. I'd love to see it. Like, they had a good range of puzzles that they tackled with this specific power up, and I think that was the whole point, is that they created this power up with a set of abilities, and that they wanted to create puzzles based around this power up, and then who knows what. Like in the new Mario title, Mario can throw out his cap, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of puzzles and things designed around that. So if that's the central power up of that game, this was the central power up of this game. You know, in the same way as that, like, we haven't seen the Flood jetpack return in any Mario level, but there's always like another subsequent Mario game rather. But there's always some sort of power up in a Mario game which gives you like a slightly better jump in some way. Like in Mario Galaxy, having the twirl gives you that like just a little bit of extra airtime. I know that in some of the newest Mario games they have like the air cancel, like you can in midair at any time just hit the button and Mario will do like an extra little twirl in midair just to give you that little bit of extra glide time. And I think anytime you have a power up like that, it just makes it easier to error correct, I guess, because sometimes what you expect from a jump arc doesn't line up exactly with how it tends to go, and rather than that miscalculation resulting in a death, having it the ability to like realize you got it wrong and then use the ability to error correct as opposed to having to just like do it all over again, I think that's much better. I think people appreciate that, like, because you still have to do something. It's not like it's automatically error correcting for you. You have to use that ability. So it's not like it removes the skill or the interaction from it, which is great.
Yeah, it just sort of it just extends the ability just enough, but without it being. I mean, the Flood does that in a way, but I think the problem with the Flood was that it made long jumps so easy that you had to extend a lot of the levels, and I think that slowed down the pace, and you spend a lot of time just floating. Whereas I feel like in this one, yeah, you'll be floating, but there's most of the jumps are pretty short, and it's more about verticality, platforms disappearing, and I love that if you jump, things change. So you have to thinking that extra step ahead is always a nice addition to a platforming puzzle.
Do you know what? I'm horrible at those levels. Like they had them in Mario Galaxy as well, and I think I died more on those levels than anything else, just because like somehow my brain does not compute the fact that like, okay, I'm going to jump and this platform is going to drop out from under me and reappear over there, and when I hit jump, I'm going to nope, I did it backwards. I got it wrong. I'm falling to my death. So I don't know why my brain just doesn't work like that, but I do appreciate those levels because it gives me a real challenge, although sometimes it's a bit it's like, okay, gonna put this down and come back to it in a little bit.
And those ones are almost impossible if you have another person, or I couldn't imagine doing those levels with 4 people.
Imagine. Oh god, no.
Yeah, where the ones in Galaxy that really threw me off were when you'd be on a platform that would be moving, and then the gravity would change as you hit different areas, and you had to suss out ahead of time where you were going to be. But yeah, I mean, even when those were challenging, it was it's nice to see that people can accuse Nintendo of writing the same sort of games and the same characters, but they still have ways of pushing forward the idea of platforming in a genre that just really is not being used. I mean, a quick aside, Yooka-Laylee had just come out, and I see all this love for Banjo-Kazooie in those games, and I feel like I never really got into those ones because playing Banjo-Kazooie in the N64, to me, they always felt too slow, and it wasn't really about jumping. It wasn't about the challenge of navigating a character in a 3D space. It was more about just spending time picking daisies.
So it was more about like physically moving around the environment than it was about making jumps.
Yeah, and I didn't enjoy the actual feel of moving. I think that's what Nintendo and Mario has always been the gold standard of, is making the joy of movement their top priority.
Yeah, it's Mario's Jumpman after all.
That's right. Now, let's talk about some Wii U gimmicks. I wasn't really a big fan of tapping on the tablet to control platforms on the screen. I felt like that didn't really make a lot of sense because I couldn't look at both at the same time. I didn't really mind blowing into the Wii U tablet because I could still look at the screen at least. How did you find those gimmicks?
Well, I think I played most of the game on the Wii U tablet because like a lot of single player Wii U games, it became the sort of thing I was playing like in the bathroom. So
Okay.
I always had the tablet in my hands and I was always using that to play, and I was always looking at that screen anyway. So it was never like I was looking up or down at one screen or another. I definitely feel like those tap blocks were really cool and utilized much better in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. I thought they were interesting, and I'm not sure how they could have had them in the game without use of the gamepad. So again, that's just Nintendo creating the technology and then utilizing it to add a bit of novelty to the experience. Because like in the New Super Mario Brothers games, they had the platforms that are controlled by tilt, and I think you probably hated those much more than the tap the screen. Because at least the touchscreen's precise. At least, especially with fixed camera, you're always tapping like where you mean to. If something doesn't work out, it's because you weren't necessarily aware of the like where the platform would shift to after you've tapped it or something. But that's all kind of like part of figuring it out. Like it's a puzzle, right? So I don't know. I didn't necessarily love it, nor did I dislike it, but I thought it was just like, you know, one more thing that they added into the game to make certain levels feel different or fresh.
Now, let's talk about the soundtrack a little bit. I think they went a little bit away from the almost formal sound of the orchestrated Galaxy and Galaxy 2 soundtrack. I think, and I think, yeah, the worst case scenario, it sounds a bit cheesy, a lot of saxophone. But in the best case scenario, I try to think of it as this sounds a bit more like a band playing, and it definitely has like a fun atmosphere to it. Like the Ice World track, I love so much. It's sort of like it's in World 3. It's more like a very beautiful lullaby. And the first castle music, which appears later on in the game, but not in all the other ones, that's got a very kind of like Egyptian scale. It sounds like an action theme from Uncharted. So I found those two were great, and there were a couple other standouts, but I feel like the music in this one was, I noticed it being more repetitive than usual.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just don't like saxophone, admittedly. Like, it's just not the kind of instrument I like to hear. So when a lot of the game does rely on saxophone, like I think the swamp track in this game I just outright did not like. Like, anytime they use that, and then they have a reprisal of that theme in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and I'm like, oh, guys. Like, I don't know, even playing Paper Mario Sticker Star, which I dislike for a number of other reasons, that game was very heavy on the saxophone. I was like, guys, take the saxophone, throw it away. I'm so sick of hearing it.
Michael Bublé outlawed saxophone solos on his tour.
It's just invading all my Mario games, and I love the Mario Galaxy soundtrack. Like, in contrast, I have every Mario Galaxy, almost every single song in my perpetual playlist of music. So, love that. Wasn't a huge fan of the departure, nor was I a fan of the direction that the departure took. Overall, it served the game, like, reasonably well. Like I said, there was only one track I actively disliked, but, like, again, sound design wise, every Mario title is always like top notch in terms of polish, and visuals, like everything, the way like the grass looks like fuzzy and the dirt doesn't look like grimy, but it's got a nice bit of texture to it. Just everything about this as an HD Mario title just really shined, like especially if something was like wet or had water running down it. Really, really pretty game, and I don't think it gets enough credit for that, because it's like people just think of it like, oh, it's Mario, it's just simplified shapes and forms. Like, no, but if you look, the detail is all there, and it's really nice. Like, even the fuzziness of the cat suits, or just the glint on the those transparent pipes, like everything was HD and like really, really nice looking.
Yeah, I think Mario games, because they're so familiar to people, they don't quite get the credit in terms not only just of in how well executed they are, but like you were saying with the visuals, people know what Mario looks like and they go, "Wow, yeah, it's just another Mario game." But really, the detail is there. There's some, yeah, that the water effects running down the camera. They don't abuse any of those camera effects like lens flare, J.J. Abrams style. They have a nice they have a very nice subtle touch to them. What did you think of the geometry of the level design? There's obviously, if the 2D Mario games were made on a grid, this was made on sort of a three-dimensional grid with a lot of cubes. I liked it. I thought that it communicated really well when I was playing what could be jumped on and how I could interact with objects. But did you think that it ended up being a little too samey, or did you like their approach?
No, I mean, it serves the gameplay, right? Like you have, you remarked early in this episode about how this is now limited to an 8-directional sort of game. Like you don't have the complete freedom of movement. Actually, didn't you, like when you start dashing, don't you get freedom of movement? Isn't it switch away from like the 8-directional?
No, it's always
I seem to recall something about that. Always 8-direction. Huh. Well, it just because of the control scheme being limited along those axes, having the design of the environment be very like shapely and blocky just fits that really well. It gives you a good sense of what you like your paths of traversal line up with the paths you can actually move along. So yeah, it's a decision that was made to serve gameplay. So I think they made they did, like, I don't know, it looked nice in spite of that. What can I say?
Yeah, and that's a strength of Nintendo at their best, is that a lot of the decisions are made to serve the themes of the game and to serve gameplay. Locking it to 8 directions, using this geometry, it all works together and informs just a very intuitive level design, and just makes a game that is very breezy to run through. I found that this was just, my overall experience of it was just rushing forward and constantly surprised by all the different charming additions they put into the game. I feel like they sort of brought back a bit more of the enemy ferocity, as compared to the other 3D games, the more open ones, where you're not really too worried about enemies. But because you have sort of a limited area to go around in and some actual like 2D areas, they are able to make it a bit more dangerous, where I would actually die to some of these enemies a lot more often than before.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always nice to have the, like, especially some of the enemies that acted on the terrain, like the spikes throwing the rollers and the things that like create stage hazards that you have to jump over. You can't attack them or kill them. They're just invincible hazards. So it was a nice balance. Definitely, it made the levels feel much more alive, and it's not just like whenever you have an enemy that's like more of an organic element to the game, it feels much more interesting than a simple like, I don't know, a spinning fire bar. Just never quite feels as interesting as something that at least pretends to be alive, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, no, I know what you mean. I always think when I'm going through these, say a spinning fire bar laden Bowser castle, like, does Bowser have a secret way to get to his lair, or does he sort of paint himself into a room? He's like, haha, Mario will never get through this. And then he realizes he has to go to the bathroom, but the only way to get to the bathroom is to cross 10 fire bars spinning around, and he goes, I'll just hold it.
Do you know what? I think you're reading too far into it.
I probably am. What did you think about...
I think it's a game. And again, this is what we were saying before. Everything serves gameplay first. Like, it's never... You never feel like... what is this world you're playing in? What are all these like flying blocks and platforms? It feels whimsical and happy, and it feels like a level. It doesn't feel like
it's not a town.
The worlds that we're in. Yeah, and that's, again, one of the things you kind of lose between this and a Mario Galaxy game, where like those were definitely still levels, but there were like inhabitants and creatures and spots where things lived, and it's not like I imagine that this is a perfectly sustainable ecosystem that they have set up in the Mario Galaxy world, but like Delfino Plaza especially felt like a very like real place in terms of the way they were able to construct like all the the houses and the shops and the tourist destinations and all that. So that made it feel a little cohesive, and it's something you're naturally going to lose when you move to a more like level by level sort of method of construction. But again, it serves gameplay, so I don't mind.
Yeah, and Mario Sunshine is, from what I've seen, typically the most crapped upon Mario games. So maybe they realized, oh, we tried to make it cohesive and nobody cared. So back to the drawing board of it.
I don't know. Like I remember playing through that game when I was a bit younger and finding it like frustratingly difficult. So I'm not sure if I'd played it when I was a bit older. I feel like I've sort of plateaued on my sort of gaming skill, but I definitely feel like I'm better at games now than I was when I was a kid. So who knows how I would have experienced Mario Sunshine if I were to play through it now. Not that I necessarily would go back and play it, just because I've gone through that gauntlet and I have emerged and I am not going back into it. So it's an experience I'll have to pass on.
That's kind of the thing with games that we're seeing a lot in the modern age, especially with AAA games, is that I feel like they have to be, the developers seem to feel like a game has to be really, really long. And I feel like they become this a good enough experience to go through at first, but then maybe you lose a bit of steam. Maybe you don't even finish it. But I feel like with 3D World, it's a lot more focused, or especially new Super Mario U, there are these experiences that I feel like I could go back and run through. Like Mario 1, 2, and even 3, those are games that if you were sitting with a friend, you could play through those in an evening. And I feel like they kind of lend themselves to going back to. Whereas Mario 64, I might go round around in one of the worlds, but I don't think I could ever go back and collect 120 stars again. I don't know if I'd want to go through Sunshine and complete it. And even Mario Galaxies, they're big games, and I just don't feel that draw to ever go back. And I wonder if that's almost to the detriment out of it, where maybe you'll get a longer amount of hours you could play through it the first time, but over the years, over my lifetime, I'll probably spend a lot more time on the Marios that I can complete in a shorter amount of time.
It's sort of like the difference between people who choose to upload videos in 10-minute chunks with like a new upload every day versus someone who uploads like a hour-long video at the end of the week. It's like, honestly, I'm much more likely to watch the 10-minute chunks than I am the hour-long segment, just because I can't commit that amount of time in a single sitting. Even if YouTube now sometimes remembers where you left off on a video, it's just the ease of consuming the sort of smaller bite-sized chunks that makes those experiences easier to go back to.
Mm-hmm. It's less daunting to look at, and even if you end up sitting there and watching all 6 of them, and you spend the same amount of time or more, it just seems like, it's kind of like no one ever sits down and says, I'm going to eat 30 cookies. Yeah, but you might eat 30
you just
cookies
look up
one
at
at a
the
time.
empty package, you're like, oh.
Anyways, did you have any closing thoughts on this game and its place in the Mario franchise?
We covered pretty much everything. I just like those. What did you think of the like question mark block houses, like the ones that, to distinguish them from the regular question mark blocks, but the like purple ones? The ones you sort of jump into and play like short, bite-sized levels, like really like complete them within 10 seconds, but do a whole bunch of them in a row.
Okay, I liked those. I like the challenge of it and sort of the switch of the pace, and then again using the same physics and mechanics of Mario. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I found that those were quite fun.
Yeah, I like those as well, and there's definitely a super challenge one of those near the end of the game, which I don't know if I got all the stars from. And then there's the super enjoyable like little Captain Toad levels, which eventually inspired the full Captain Toad Treasure Tracker game. So that was just a nice little, again, as you say, using the mechanics from the actual game, aside from the fact that you can't jump, like having this little more like puzzle oriented in nature.
Yeah, those were a nice break after to sort of slow everything down and and just have your mind think in a different way while using mostly the same mechanics, but a limited move set, and then having the nice bonus of even we've slowed you down, we've forced you to go through this, but they give you such a gigantic reward. I really enjoyed those. It's almost got me convinced to grab the Treasure Tracker Toad game, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet.
It's a pretty fun game. If you enjoyed those levels at all, I'd say you'll like the overall game. Like, I have played through that one with my sister. Like, we would take turns on it, and it's nice to have some of them are definitely like really interesting brain tickling puzzles when you're trying to go for the every level has this sort of like play it to completion, and then there's the mastery condition for it. Some of the mastery condition ones are very interesting and challenging. So it's a game that's easy to get through, but then hard to get the sort of 100% mastery thing. But you always unlock new content as a result, so it's pretty cool. I would recommend it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, in summation on my end, I would put this game pretty darn high in terms of in the Mario franchise. It's a game that I think about going back to. I mean, I still need to complete it, but I love it. I love the multiplayer nature, even though that's not the ideal way to play. I love that they just put it in there anyways, because they know that everybody's got all these Wiimotes hanging around, and everybody knows how to play Mario, so why not? I love that it seems to be the best of both worlds in terms of 3D and 2D, because I am more of a fan of the 2D Mario games, and I think that it gets back to what 2D Mario's, what I love so much about 2D Mario's. It's a beautiful game, and I think the biggest shame is that it was stranded on a system that not a lot of people bought, and I really, really hope that they somehow, maybe port a version
I can easily
to
see
the
Switch.
I think they probably, unless they have a real dead spot in releases, but I don't think they're going to put it out until Odyssey comes out. I don't think that they'd want to cannibalize their Mario market.
Yeah, it's going to continue to sell maybe some Wii U's between now and the Odyssey's release. So, yeah, I definitely, I was sort of in a similar spot. Like, it's if nothing else, it's an easy Mario game to get into. Like, if you're just now hearing of this thing called Mario, or more realistically, if you know someone who hasn't really gotten into gaming and you want a nice thing that you can sort of share an experience with, it's a great way for two people of different like skill levels in gaming to participate in together.
Well, there you go. This has been episode 35. Our next episode will be coming out in 2 weeks. I've been Matthew Falvey. You can find me on Twitter at GameThinkTalk. And Attila?
You can follow me on Twitter at BluishGreenPro, or check out my website, bluishgreenproductions.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.